Welcome back to another explainer. Now today, we're doing something just a little bit different. I want you to treat this like your own exclusive investment committee pitch. We're stepping into the shoes of a senior equity research analyst, and we are going to completely tear down the H1 2026 financial filings of the global aerospace and defense giant BAE Systems. But look, we aren't just rattling off random numbers here. We're going to rigorously run this company's raw data through the battle-tested frameworks of 4 legendary investors to see if it actually deserves a spot in your portfolio.
Here is the game plan. We are going to filter the financials through the distinct lenses of Buffett's moat test, Graham's margin of safety, Fisher's growth metrics, and Lynch's GARP principles. Then we'll run some intrinsic valuation cross-checks before delivering the final verdict.
So let's kick things off with our first framework, Warren Buffett's economic moat test. We're pulling out Buffett's quality checklist to figure out if BAE Systems is truly a great business with a durable competitive advantage.
To satisfy the Oracle of Omaha, we have to ask his absolute favorite question. Does BAE have a moat that's still going to matter in 20 years? Is the business model relatively simple to grasp? And, crucially, is management allocating capital clearly and rationally? Well, let's follow the cash.
Okay, look at this massive number. In the first half of 2026, BAE Systems achieved a 124% cash conversion rate. That translates into a staggering £2.1 billion in operating business cash flow, which was largely driven by favorable customer receipts and advances in their air segment.
So, the so what here for a Buffett-style investor is pretty clear. They generate more than enough actual tangible cash to internally fund their own organic growth, all while heavily rewarding their shareholders. I mean, we're seeing underlying return on sales ticking up to 10.8%. They just returned £0.9 billion directly to shareholders through dividends and buybacks. And the moat? It's practically unassailable. They are a top 10 Pentagon supplier, a critical UK national partner, and they're sitting on a record £84 billion order backlog. To put that into perspective, that backlog is roughly 5.3 times their annual sales. Talk about deep visibility. They pass the Buffett quality filter with flying colors.
All right, moving right along to our second lens, Benjamin Graham's margin of safety. Let's put away Buffett's checklist for a second and pull out Graham's defensive calculator. As you probably know, Graham is all about risk mitigation and deep value. We aren't looking at the ceiling right now, we are aggressively looking at the floor. We need to know if the company is over-leveraged, if it has sufficient scale, and if the balance sheet could actually survive a sudden macro shock. Graham hates reckless debt more than a flat tire, and this brilliantly illustrates BAE's conservative leverage. In H1 2026, they held a net debt of just £3.17 billion against a highly robust total equity base of $11.9 billion. This isn't a company balancing on a tightrope, this is a financial fortress.
Just running down the Graham scorecard here. Sufficient scale? Absolutely. They did £15.8 billion in underlying sales just in this half year, growing 9% on a constant currency basis. Defensive debt is totally locked in, as we just saw. Earnings growth? Underlying EPS is up a very healthy 13% to 38.9 pence. Now, to be totally impartial, our specific half-year snapshot does limit a strict 10-year net income test, which is a classic Graham requirement, but the sheer massive sales scale, the conservative leverage, and that EPS growth, it strongly satisfies his rigorous demand for downside protection.
Next up, we pivot to our third perspective, Philip Fisher's growth and excellence. We're stepping away from pure balance sheet defense now and focusing strictly on qualitative growth, management excellence, and R&D pipelines.
Fisher's really wants to know if the addressable market is actually large enough to sustain long-term compounding growth over the next 10 to 20 years. Are these products going to revolutionize their sector? And does management have the chops to commercialize those innovations?
I want you to anchor on this staggering number. Remember that £84 billion backlog we talked about? Well, beyond that, management sees a £180 billion opportunity pipeline stretching past 2035. This includes absolutely massive programs like the F-35 build, Dreadnought submarines, and the SSN-AUKUS program. And look, this isn't just abstract pipeline data on a spreadsheet. This is driven by cutting-edge, next-generation R&D. For example, the Tempest aircraft, which is a core part of the Global Combat Air Program, or GCAP, a tri-national collaboration between the UK, Japan, and Italy. This kind of sixth-generation capability firmly secures BA's dominance in the future battle space.
The economic ripple effect of this R&D is literally monumental. According to an independent PwC report, the broader Future Combat Air System program alone is estimated to contribute £16 billion to UK gross value added by 2035 and an incredible £37 billion by 2070. It's creating highly productive jobs, generating £130,000 in direct GVA per worker. Plus, BAE is deeply integrated across 25-plus European nations, the US and Australia. This totally validates management's ability to commercialize massive innovations, hitting Fisher's compounding criteria out of the park.
Shifting gears once more to our fourth framework, Peter Lynch's reasonable price GARP. We want that growth, for sure, but we need to ensure we aren't overpaying for this defense giant.
Lynch insists on a few key things. First, you have to be able to explain the business in one sentence. Second, we have to classify it. Are we dealing with a slow grower, a stalwart, or a fast grower? And is the growth trajectory dangerously fast or boringly slow?
Looking at this sales breakdown, the one-sentence test is actually a breeze. BAE Systems is a highly diversified, global defense contractor, providing everything from cyber intelligence to nuclear submarines. The balance here is great. Air leads the pack at £4.8 billion, but it's heavily supported by electronic systems, maritime, platforms and services, and cyber. It is the definition of a true industry stalwart.
Ticking through Lynch's GARP boxes, we have that underlying EPS growing at a really healthy 13%. They've actually just upgraded their 3-year rolling free cash flow guidance to over £6.7 billion for the 2024 to 2026 period. Now, Lynch also wants us to hunt for the weak spots, and we do see that the maritime segment is currently acting as a bit of a slow grower, pulling in a 6.1% return on sales. That's primarily because massive programs like those Dreadnought submarines are still in their early, lower margin stages. But overall, that 13% EPS growth hits Lynch's absolute sweet spot, fast enough to compound beautifully, but stable enough to rely on.
All right, time for valuation and intrinsic cross-checks. Now that we've cleared the qualitative hurdles, let's rapid-fire some hard quantitative outputs from H1 2026 to see how they feed our valuation models.
Firing through these metrics, BE delivered an 11% underlying EBIT increase to £1.7 billion. They pushed free cash flow to an incredible £1.8 billion for the half year. For context, that's a dramatic swing from a negative £0.4 billion in the prior year period. For our dividend models, they increased the interim dividend by 11% to 15.0 pence per share, and looking at capital structure, net debt was reduced down to £3.2 billion. Ultimately, this data showcases undeniable institutional-grade financial health ready to plug right into any valuation cross-check you throw at it.
Okay, bringing it all home with our final investment verdict. We filtered the data, established the hard inputs, and now it is time for the committee to decide.
When we step back and look at the whole shebang, BAE Systems systematically passes the core tests. Buffett? Pass, thanks to that deep moat and 124% cash conversion. Graham? Pass, with highly conservative leverage providing a strong margin of safety. Fisher? Pass, driven by a wild £180 billion pipeline. And Lynch? Pass, offering a 13% EPS growth trajectory across heavily diversified segments.
And honestly, as BAE's CEO Charles Woodburn noted in the H1 report, governments worldwide are responding to current volatility with sustained budget increases. Impartially speaking, management's view perfectly mirrors the data we've seen today. Global instability is actively driving a heavily expanded, highly visible long-term order book for the defense sector. So, given this rigorous breakdown, filtering nearly £16 billion in half-year sales through the most demanding investment frameworks in history, I leave it to you, the committee. Based on the numbers, does BAE Systems belong in your portfolio?